What we did early on at mPharma, which set us on a good path to having a good culture, is running a flat organization where we didn't care about titles and we cared more about each other's opinion. So you could be an engineer with 10 years of experience. Whenever we were having discussions, we wanted to hear everybody in the room as opposed to just hearing the voice of people that are considered to be experienced. I think that made it possible for people to just pick up their mind and be honest all the time.
Yeah. So one of the things I was going to ask is, how do you systematize that culture of direct and honest feedback? Is it just something you practice on a day-to-day, or are there like certain ceremonies you have with managers or developers themselves to make sure there's a structured way to give that feedback?
From my perspective, for the people I manage, I speak to them about the importance of giving people direct feedback on a continuous basis. But then the way I lead a team is to try to be a good example of the type of things I would like to see or the type of behaviors that I would like to see displayed on the team. So I try to be an embodiment of what I would like to see displayed on the team, where if one of the people that reports to me directly gives me feedback, which is not positive, I try to take that and then work on it and then come back with a response to them. I think that having the whole team see that actually informs behavior, critical behavior on the team.
Yeah, very cool. In addition to having engineering metrics and business impact metrics, do you have employee engagement metrics as well?
Yes, so on a quarterly basis, we do an engagement survey just to gauge the health of the team. A couple of quarters ago, we ran one that exposed the need to actually have much more transparency around compensation and then how we do promotions and then base pay increments. So we used that data to go back to human capital, and I was like, I want to be as transparent as possible by sharing what our career levels are, what the salary bands are per career levels to the entire engineering organization. And even though we couldn't get permission to share our full salary levels, we got to a certain level. And I think the team was very appreciative of that.
Okay. So I think one thing that I'm curious, so you're building this great tech team at mPharma. You're focused on culture. You're focused on best practices, just building a high-performing tech org. So when you're hiring software developers, what qualities are you looking for apart from technical skills? Like, what makes a candidate stand out for you as a great potential hire?
I think for me, I'll say communication. A candidate who is able to communicate clearly. And then secondly, someone who understands fundamentals and how things actually work. So we have a lot of interviews. What we've realized is a lot of times when we ask questions, there are so many libraries out there that people use to get things done. They do not actually pay close attention to how those libraries work under the hood. There's been instances where people work with databases and they do not even know how the database works. I think it's important that people pay attention to the fundamentals and then ensure that they understand how things work and are able to communicate those things effectively in any situation.
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, just like from your experience in learning programming, like which way did you learn? I learned 100% programming through like just trying to build shit and then figuring out why it's not working all of a sudden, right? But there is like an element to figuring out, like for instance, like fixing a scaling issue, right? Actually, you know what my favorite example is? The classic like junior developer example is like building something without pagination. It's like there's no thought that crosses someone's mind where it's like there might be more than 20. But it's interesting because it's like, from my perspective, it's like I I don't know if it's a fundamentals thing as much as it's a thing where you don't know the problems you've never experienced. You know what I mean? Because like if you haven't hit the problem where you're like, oh, actually this list grows, and maybe I can't load 1,000 items into this list, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you gain the knowledge by experience, but there's the other part where if you understand how the underlying architecture works, it
Yeah,
kind of informs how you build
that's true.
like a particular feature.
For sure. I mean, I think it's always there's so many instances or cases like that where you have these sort of slap on solutions and they're always a smell that your architecture is just janky. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's just always a smell. So, moving on to a slightly different thing, any resources or communities you recommend to stay informed about new tech trends or just to learn generally?
I recently chanced upon this page on Twitter called Byte Go, where they share how to craft an architecture, how organizations are building resilient architectures. So I read a lot of those. I watch a lot of YouTube to just keep myself abreast. So a couple of channels I follow, I think InfoQ. I think there's a channel called Go2 that I follow, just trying to understand how other companies are building much more resilient architecture. And I read a lot. I have a number of books that I've purchased. So Domain Driven Design is one of the books that I've read from just an engineering perspective.
Any other books in the tech domain that have been influential on either how you manage or how you architect systems or just how you develop code?
Yeah, there's one book, I think, Elegant Puzzle, which is one of the nicest books I've read when it comes to managing an engineering team. I think every single person that wants to manage a team should read that book. But then there was this other book which wasn't engineering focused, but then because I'm very interested in culture, I think for me personally, I think for you to have a high functioning engineering organization, culture is important.
Yeah.
Where you respect the people that you work with, you are honest with them. So I read the book, No Rules book, which was very helpful in actually changing my perspective in terms of how I manage the team. So it changed my perspective about even compensation, trying to ensure that you are paying above what the market range is. I do not want money to be the focus point of any of the engineers on my team. I want them to be solely focused on the impact that we are making. And as the company grows, I've gotten permission from the CEO where he's open to helping us meet the resource needs of the engineers specifically. So that is actually not a challenge for them.
Yeah. That's always a challenging budget conversation at a high level.
Yeah.
I guess if you were starting out now and you could give some advice to yourself, sort of how to like build your career in tech, what do you think you would say to yourself? I guess the question is, what advice would you give to software developers who are looking to build a career in tech and are early on in their careers?
I would say early on, always find a mentor and be less focused on how much you make in the beginning and be much more focused on developing your skill or your craft. Finding an organization that will help you develop those skill sets it's very important because once you are the best at doing that particular thing, you will actually get offers that will blow your mind. So I think just focusing on your craft at the beginning stages will be very helpful.
Yeah.
I think one thing that really helped me was I found myself in a community of people. So I think I would actually encourage people to join a community because we were in an incubator with different companies, different engineers. There was like a large group of people that you could learn from. And when it comes to software engineering specifically, there's no single person that knows it all. You will actually need to be able to reach out to other people within the organization to find out how they solve a particular problem, or if there's a specific technology that helps them do a particular thing really well.
You know, I think that generally is such good advice for everyone, but especially in tech, because you have all of these people who like want to say, here's how you do the thing. It doesn't matter if they're talking about how to best write React components to how to best measure your team's performance to how to be productive. You have all these people who are like, this is exactly the truth. And this is like the only way forward. And the truth is that, and I think it's true probably in every industry, but like no one really has any idea what they're talking about. Like if people do know what they're talking about, it's like a very small section, right? And like if they were to speak only to that tiny little bit of knowledge that they have, then it would be like, yeah, that person's correct. Mostly like, I think growing your career is about listening to all these people who do have more experience than you, and also remembering that even if they have 20 years of experience, right, you have to just take everything with massive grains of salt and understand that just like, you know, debugging a tough problem, you have to take in all of this information from all these different people and then come out with your own opinions about everything. All right, a fun question. What's your most memorable tech war story? I'm thinking like production failure, maybe a demo gone bad. You got any ones that you can share?
Yeah, I would share one that happened quite recently when we were doing a migration. I think I wrote an article on that. We were doing a migration from Marathon Mesos to Kubernetes because we had marked out on Marathon Mesos. That project was dead in the water because there was not a lot of support for it. We needed to do a migration to Kubernetes. But then this was at a time when we had a lot of users as well. So the company continued to have hyper growth. So we could not afford like a downtime. And then we did a migration. There was a misconfiguration in terms of like we miscalculated resource usage for the individual pods. So what ended up happening was
that's a nightmare.
Everything kept timing out because services were either running out of memory because we had a lot of users.
Did it start stacking up as well?
Yeah, it started stacking up, and like it was a complete nightmare. Nobody could use the app. Everybody was on like our support page saying what's happening. CEO was on my neck. The product team was on my neck asking what's happening. And then we had to reconfigure. But then in all of this, we are at a point where we believe even if we were to add more users today, we should be able to easily scale with the infrastructure. But like it was terrible.
Why'd you guys do it during business hours?
So we deployed on a Sunday. There was low usage.
Yeah.
The usage was very low, so we thought everything was fine. And then on Monday, when there was a bunch of requests.
Wow, what a way to start your week.
Yeah. It was crazy. I think it took us about 24 to 48 hours. That was an experience that I wouldn't wish on anyone.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So this question comes from the GitStart community from Soshima on Team Spartan. And he asks, what trends do you foresee in the tech industry in emerging markets? And how is mPharma positioning itself to ride these trends?
With this specific question, I think as we are all aware, there's been a rise in using artificial intelligence to improve a number of processes. And I think at mPharma, because we are primarily focused on healthcare, the only way we've been trying to use this technology is on helping MCAs, which we call medicine counter assistants, which are the people that you find located in the pharmacies that we work with. Mm-hmm. So we are trying to better educate them on how to prescribe specific medications to patients. We've seen incidences where these MCAs do not understand how medicine should be prescribed to a patient. Mm-hmm. And what we've done is to use AI to transcribe the directions of use of a particular medication and then display that information to the MCA at the time that they are dispensing that particular medication to a patient.
How do you make sure that this LLM is giving the right, like it's not hallucinating information, right? Because that might be a critical issue in this sort of use case.
Okay, so our procurement process, we do drug registration or product registrations through our procurement team, which is constituted by pharmacists.
Yeah.
The idea is to have them review the data that the AI generates before we present our information to the customer. We don't just go from displaying that information directly from the AI. It goes through a formal review process simply because it's medicine. Once it's approved by a qualified pharmacist within mPharma, that particular information is shown to an MCA, which they can use to inform a patient on how to take a particular medication.
Very cool. So another question from Soshima from Team Spartan, which is, how would you say your journey and the diverse projects you've worked on prepared you for your role as CTO of mPharma?
I think I've been lucky enough to work in different cultures. So I've worked for companies in Ghana. I've had the opportunity to work with companies in the US, in the UK. And I think just having access to the different types of culture has actually taught me how I think an engineering organization should work, or how engineers should be treated on a whole. So I think engineers want you to be as honest with them always as possible. And I think much more generally, unlike for the non-African companies, I've had the opportunities where it's been less micromanaging and then more like, this is what I'm trying to achieve. So try to figure out a way to actually achieve this particular objective rather than telling me specifically how to achieve those specific objectives. And I think that has shaped how I approach things currently.
Awesome. A good follow-up question from Raymond on Team Asgard, which is, throughout your journey, what has been the key factor that has kept you motivated and driven and enabled you to achieve the career and successes you've accomplished thus far?
Personally, I would say my focus on wanting to make an impact on the African continent. I think because I was obsessed with ensuring that Africa worked, that has actually propelled me to not taking other lucrative offers and actually looking to build organizations on the continent that will actually be able to get to a stage to afford the higher wages. Because it's difficult. It's difficult to be able to pay higher wages when your revenues do not match up to those higher wages. And I think just by focusing on that particular mission, for me personally, has actually made me want to stay.
For sure. That's amazing. And I think it's hard to go somewhere that's not making a social impact after you've been working somewhere that is.
yeah, it's pretty hard.
I guess a few things left. One is, do you have any parting words or pieces of advice that you would sort of give to them as they're sort of building their careers in tech?
Yeah, for anyone wanting to be in tech, I understand that a lot of times people are focused on the money. But then I think, personally, I would say focus on your passion. You can decide to make money until like a certain point so that you can follow your passion. But then personally, I feel that you should focus on the things that drive you, that give you satisfaction. Focus on making an impact in the lives of people, in the lives of like a wider audience. Look to join companies because you believe in their mission, or not because they give you the highest paycheck. Be focused on ensuring that every work that comes out of you is of the highest quality, whether someone is paying attention or not.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think there's also a lot of social impact to be had in, wherever you're working, in helping everyone else around you grow. And just like we talked about everyone not knowing anything, I think sharing how little you know is always useful with everyone around you.
Yeah. I think when it comes to sharing, that's pretty much important. It's one of like the core pillars here at mPharma, which is we focus. And I think, James, you crafted the cultural goals. One of our goals is around teamwork. We have a big focus on teamwork. We expect every single member of the team to be committed to helping the other person. So we have a lot of ways to communicate asynchronously. One of the things that I do for every single engineer that joins my team is to ensure that I take them through the need to be available to assist. And I think it's important that as you continue to grow your career, you continue to make it a point to actually help people that are also starting their career.
Yeah.
As well.
I think another interesting thing there, like understanding that part of helping others learn is also helping them learn how to learn. Because I see a lot of people, especially senior engineers or some managers, they'll step in and they'll just show exactly how to do something.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's useful, right? But a lot of times there's some benefit to being like, a more polite and guided version of, read the fucking manual is actually quite useful as well.
Yeah, I think it's a tricky situation. So, for example, mPharma is getting to the point where, like, we can't have downtimes. We can't make a lot of mistakes. Now, I think in the beginning we used to say you can make mistakes, but then you don't make the same mistake twice. We still carry that mantra, but like we are getting to the point where we can't make any mistakes at all, like in our production applications.
For sure.
Simply because it could be life and death for a patient. And even though we want people to learn from their mistakes, we are getting to the point where the margin of error is beginning to become very narrow for us here at mPharma.
Yeah, for sure. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Selasie, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you for having me. Great opportunity to have the chance to speak to the GitStart community and also to speak to you once again.